Okay, so we're running. Okay, so then we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance with our live flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, pleased to welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Union Township Planning Commission, our second live meeting in recent times. So let's see, roll call please.
Darren?
Here.
Daring?
Here.
Squadrito?
Here.
Lapp? Here. Shingles?
Here.
Buckley?
Here.
LaBelle?
Here.
And Albrecht? Here. Everyone's here.
Okay, thank you. So we have our agenda for tonight. It's a relatively short agenda, a couple of business items. Is there anything else that needs to be on tonight's agenda that anyone is aware of? Now I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved. Support.
So motion by LaBelle, second by Darren to approve the agenda as submitted. Any discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's see. Next item is the approval of the minutes from January 18th. So that was our last meeting over here. Any corrections to the January 18th minutes? I thought they were an accurate representation of the meeting that I remember sitting through.
Motion to approve the minutes from January 18th. Support.
So motion by LaBelle, second by Shingles, is that right? To approve the minutes of January 18th, any discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. So, next item is correspondence, board reports, and presentations. First item is Commissioner Thiering, updates from Board of Trustees.
Okay, to update you on the conversations on the sidewalk and pathways that we had at our last meeting. I did bring it up to the board at the January 26th meeting. We had, I thought, a nice start of discussion. And based on that discussion, other board members had interest in continuing the conversation as well. So as a result, Mr. Nanny at an April trustee meeting will be giving us it's a Union Township sidewalk activities, past, present, and future presentation. So if anybody has questions that maybe they'd like me to ask Mr. Nanny, or even better yet, email your questions to Mr. Nanny beforehand, and he would have the opportunity to possibly have the answer in front of him during his presentation. So it was a great discussion we had, and I'm kind of looking forward to Mr. Nanny's presentation in April. And that is all I have at this time.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Thiering on board-related items? Okay, thank you. Let's see, next item is possibly updates from Zoning Board of Appeals.
We did meet last month for the Zoning Board of Appeals. We had one variance request that was on the docket for review. It was actually a postponement from a previous meeting. So this was the second time that we were reviewing it. It was a request on Broomfield Road for a variance, a setback variance for the construction of a small building that was actually approved at that meeting. There was no additional agenda items for that meeting. I'm not sure if we have anything coming up for the next month or not. Nothing yet.
So that was approved then, or?
It was approved. There was one dissent and the rest approved, but it was an issue of having a cement pad in a location that was within the setback, and the applicant wanted to build on that site, and there are some grading concerns that were expressed for the remainder of this site that was deemed less than convenient for an alternative construction site.
Okay. Any questions for Commissioner Buckley, ZBA items? Okay, thank you. And then the last one that's listed is Commissioner Darren, updates from sidewalks and pathways.
And we have had nothing new other than our joint meeting that we had. That was the last meeting for sidewalks and pathways.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Any other presentations that anyone is aware of? Okay. Well, it's not a presentation, but I guess I'll do it here rather than wait till the end of the meeting. Just a reminder, you got an email not too long ago from Peter, I think actually a couple of them, about it's training season coming up, planning and zoning training. There's a variety of workshops. Some of them are online, some of them are in person. A lot of them are in March. So if you're interested in any of them, let Peter know and he'll get you registered. Last year, I did the risk management one, which was online, and it's online again. I'd recommend that one. It was a good discussion. There's one on zoning, the zoning ordinance A to Z, okay, and then some others. So have a look at that and give some thought to participate. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, it's really, again, I don't know where it would go, but and it's not my desire to erase him from the history of the thing, but Alex is still listed on our roster, and not only here, but also on our website. And in particular on the website, I would think we would want to let it be known that we have at least one vacancy. So I would suggest updating that. Okay, so at this point is public comment. So if there's anyone who would like to address the Planning Commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda, they are invited to do so at this time. We just ask you to give us your name and address for the minutes. You can step up to the podium here and address your comments to the commission. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Public comment is open at 7:11. And seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that back up. There'll be an extended public comment later in the meeting. So we'll move on to our business items. So they're under other business because we've seen it before. So you have the text amendment, the proposed change to the zoning ordinance for solar energy facilities, and you have in your packet the update from staff and communication from the applicant, but I'll ask if Ronnie or Peter has anything you want to say by way of introduction. This is going to be a public hearing for us tonight, and then we'll move on to consideration.
So just a brief introduction for purposes of our recorded, those who might be viewing this as a recording. This is, as you said, text amendment application has been submitted to make 2 changes to section 6.39 of our zoning ordinance, which is a section that regulates solar energy systems. And the request was to increase the height, allowable height for freestanding solar energy facilities from, right now it's 20 feet, move that up to 25 feet. In addition to that, staff recommended that some setback changes be included to adjust the minimum required setbacks, essentially to reflect that increase in height. and also address some larger facilities and provide for reasonable setbacks all around. So the amendment covers those two areas. As we go, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. So, because this is a zoning, proposed change to the zoning ordinance, it requires a public hearing. And so we'll move to the public hearing now. We want to give everyone an opportunity to speak. So we'll ask people to seek recognition and again, come up to the podium, speak into the microphone, give us your name and address for the minutes, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Once everyone who wants to speak has spoken, we'll entertain the possibility of recognizing people for additional comments. So the public hearing on PTXT 21-02, what's being dubbed the Coin Solar Energy Amendment, that public hearing is open at 7:15. I don't know if it's like C-SPAN where they can only see me and they can't see the audience, but there's no one here right now, so we'll wait a minute or so just to, if anyone rushes in from outside and wants to speak. There's been no written communication about this, I'm assuming?
No, we've not received anything regarding this particular public hearing.
Okay. Well, once again, if someone rushes in the next couple minutes here, we'll let them speak, but let the record show that no public comments were offered, and we'll close the public hearing. So it's open for discussion, so that ultimately our action is a recommendation to the board, either to approve or not approve. And so the item is open for discussion. We have discussed it before, but if there's any questions that anyone has, this would be a good time to ask.
I had a question. Table 1, minimum setbacks, is that, there are 2 tables there. Is that all a part of table 1? Because it speaks to conform to minimum required setbacks, distance specified in table 1, and then the first part of table 1 is all strike through. So is that second part of table 1 as well?
It is. Essentially, the first part is the existing table 1,
Table,
which
okay.
we're proposing to delete and replace.
Gotcha, okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Actually, that raises the question, I guess maybe it's a dumb question, because I haven't come back and place this within the existing ordinance, but on page 1 is table 2, and on page 2 is table 1. Are they misnumbered, or do they renumber because it's in a different section, or?
It's actually, the way this is written, if you look at, you have part 1, part 2, this is just how we divided this
Yeah.
amendment itself. If you see part 2 actually refers to subsection D, height.
Mhm.
And of course, that's the amendment that Mr. Coyne requested.
Mhm.
And so we want to put that first. And then after that, part 3 actually refers to subsection C, which would actually be the subsection before. That's how the oddity happened.
Hmm.
But we wanted to set it in order with what Mr. Coyne requested and then what staff had asked to be added to it.
Rodney, has Mr. Coyne given you any feedback on the proposed adjustments to the setbacks?
He has no objection to the change.
Okay.
I think you captured everything we had discussed in our previous conversation, but I still struggle with the titles direct use and primary use. You know, I'm average Joe. Is that in our definitions? I didn't go look.
It is, yes.
It is in our definitions, okay, perfect.
And Peter's very good. When folks have asked, of course, he's
Clears it
a
up.
wonderful resource and is able to help folks walk through those processes.
Mhm. And just to clarify, so this is 75-foot setback, front setback from any easement or just the road easement?
The front yard setbacks are always measured from the edge of the road right of way. So
Road right away.
Yeah.
This,
you might have a utility easement or something that's beyond that. That would be part of that 75-foot setback.
okay.
I assume, Rodney, that the new setbacks don't, there's no conflict or anything out of the ordinary as it comes to maybe state benchmarks or standards in that regard?
Well, what's proposed is similar to what ordinances for these larger solar installations are required to deal with in other communities.
Right.
200-foot setback is very common.
It's, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's largely there because these large facilities, which can often, sometimes they have hundreds of acres,
Yeah,
have a significant visual impact on the neighborhood. So getting back a little further, giving room, frankly, because they tend to be more rural spaces, giving room to plant rural crops between the facility and the road is exactly what that 200-foot setback is for.
okay.
So, 200 feet from each side yard on greater than 2 acres. So I have 4 acres, and I only have 335 feet of width, I'm pretty sure. Is that right? Yeah, that'd be right. How am I gonna put that in my backyard with 4 acres?
Well, one thing to keep in mind, if you look at this, what it says is, for the primary use facilities, ground mounted encumbering 2 acres or more. So this is actually the amount of land that the facility is occupying. If you have 4 acres of land, but you want to put up an acre and a half of solar, then you would be subject to the shorter setback requirement.
Okay.
And that was done on purpose, because even, again, on these larger facilities, they may be using a 100-acre piece of farm ground, but they may only occupy 30 of those acres. And so we want to talk about how much are they actually occupying.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the Township Board of Trustees that the PTXT 21-02 text amendments to section 6.39 solar energy systems of zoning ordinance number 28-06 to increase the maximum allowable height and to adjust the minimum setback standards for ground-mounted solar energy facilities be adopted as submitted for the public hearing.
Support.
So the motion was made by LaBelle and second by this guy. Oh, please, sorry.
It's been a while,
I guess let me ask this. When it says be adopted as submitted for the public hearing, is that referring to the public hearing that will be conducted by the board?
No, that's the document you have in front of you.
Oh, it's submitted for the public hearing, meaning as submitted to us for the public hearing.
Right.
All right.
The reason for that somewhat awkward language is because it is different than the language submitted by Mr. Coyne, which only addressed one issue.
Yeah,
So I want to be specific on which version, what ultimately you're recommending.
okay. I guess normally the motions, like for site plans and other things, it refers to a date. you know, like the thing as of December 6th or something like that, so yeah, it struck me as weird. All right. Any further discussion? If not, then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, no negative votes. Okay. So that'll go to the board, and they'll proceed with that from there. So the next item is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. So we discussed this last month, we looked at the survey. There's a draft revised survey in there. There's also the first couple sections of the draft of the actual master plan, what would be the new master plan. So once again, I will turn it over to Rodney if you want to say anything by way of introduction to this.
Just a couple of comments. As you said, the survey document you have before you has been updated. Our goal was to reflect the direction given at our last meeting. Hopefully that comes through. Certainly if there's any other adjustments that you'd like to make, we're happy to do that. If you're comfortable with the survey, then we would proceed to start moving ahead to be preparing to get it sent out and get some information back. As was mentioned, you have the first two chapters in draft form for the updated plan. These are kind of technical updates. It's not a policy updates, but it's just updated the details for the community. You get on page 20 of your packet, hot off the presses, some township level 2020 U.S. Census data that just became available, literally just before we were buttoning up the agenda. So you have some information there on that, related to that. And then in the administrative structure section, also a little bit of hot off the presses information on the last page. We've been making some adjustments internally. Mark Stolberg has been making some adjustments to responsibilities related to Parks and Recreation. I have been asked, as the Economic Development Department has been asked to serve as the liaison with our sports teams, that are leagues that use our sports fields, and making sure that they're all settled and dates are reserved properly, that sort of thing. So that the organizational structure reflects that element that again just is changing right now. Meeting actually I think tomorrow with the leagues to get introduced. So anyway, this is intended just to kind of wet your whistle a bit with regards to the plan. Give you some information to take a look at. Main thing is to take a look at the survey and make sure you're comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so let's look at the survey first. So it sounds like this is getting close to being ready to administer, so this would be perhaps your last opportunity to make suggestions for either other questions or modifying the questions that are in here, so open for discussion.
This is minor, just a couple typos on page 3. Number 16, the township, the capitalized. And then in the next line, between facilities and services, there's an extra space between facilities and.
Thank you. I always appreciate the extra eyes on these. You read it a million times and read right over it.
You've got this, I mean, right now anyway, it's set up as a written, printed, fill it in, mail it or drop it back off survey, but is it going to be exclusively that way, or is there thought of trying to have an online version of it?
That's the next thing we're going to be looking at is how can we facilitate this? The main issue with online is if we simply put it on the website, then we don't have any ability to kind of make sure that we're getting information from actual township residents. But we're going to be looking at what our options are. This may be something where we have some money, for example, to for a consultant to give us a hand with this. Our consultant that helped us with our downtown development authority plans last year did a lot with survey similar to this. It had an electronic version, and so I may ask them to come in and kind of offer some suggestions as to how best to proceed with that. I'd certainly like to have an electronic version. The data comes in it's much easier to deal with if it comes electronically, but we want to make sure that we're getting feedback from our residents.
Are you sending this out to all households, or how are you determining how to send it out?
That is another good question, that's also something we're looking at. The easy option is to all the property, all parcels in the township, but that does not get folks in apartments, for example. So we'll be looking at that aspect. We want to do it as broadly as we can. We want to make sure we're getting student rentals, other rentals, as well as owner-occupied properties.
And to clarify though, it's one per household, so it's not like husband, wife, it's just one per family.
That's whatever we're mailing out, yes, we one for each address, I guess. That again gets us back to that electronic option, and so we're going to look at that, and it may be that I mean, there's a number of ways we could do it. One way we could send postcards and have all electronic option, and then all members of the household can get in and fill out their own. The only challenge there is for those that don't have the ability to do the electronic, they miss out. So we have to kind of look at what works best. So that would be next up on this.
I like that you're looking at electronic because I think that Commissioner Albright makes a good point in terms of not just a household voice, but a resident voice. That's what we're looking for. I think it also makes sense for the student population or the young adult population in Union Township is substantial, and I think that it's an ongoing population. Even though the faces change, I think it's important for each of them to be able to have that voice too. I wasn't here for the conversation last month. I did have a question just about, at the risk of adding in too many options, but I think the social media, the question in number 16 about with the response from how people prefer to receive things. I don't know if it's either Facebook or social media, essentially old social media other. It's probably easy enough to add some additional options if it's electronic. But I'm just wondering if there's a wide diversity of social media, obviously, and probably your use of Facebook or any other social media specifically depends on your age. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to, like I say, if it's fill-in and it's something that is online, then it's probably easy enough for everybody to just say, this is how I consume my information. But I don't know if written in gives them room to do all that, I guess. Say that.
Well, we certainly could add, Instagram, we could add Twitter, we could add, there are a remarkable number of options.
Yeah.
I filled out a survey that I think had 16 options on it not that long ago. One of the reasons for these options is because whatever we do, whatever information we get, the township staff would be doing it. Right now, the township's social media presence is our website.
Yeah.
We don't have Facebook, we don't do anything else. That is by choice. That's at this point the administration's preference is it's because we do not have somebody that we can dedicate to doing that.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be on social media, you really do have to be active and watching it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time. So these were, Facebook is easy. There are a number of community-oriented Facebook sites. It's a location where we could relatively easily be involved if we chose to.
Yeah.
But if you'd like, we certainly can add other options.
Well, and I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but if it's something that, like, if somebody's Because, yeah, if we're gonna choose a social media platform, or even two social media platforms that we might start, I mean, we're asking them how they wanna receive their information, and if the respondent views it as Facebook or nothing, I don't know what that means to them, as opposed to if you're including, like you say, Twitter, I don't know, Instagram maybe, I guess. I mean, I'd love to see you guys out there making TikToks, but I don't think that that's necessary. You know what I mean? So I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but if somebody I don't want to give the impression to somebody that's Facebook or nothing. I guess more of just an observation, I guess.
Would it be more appropriate to then just say other social media and eliminate Facebook as the option and let people say what they use?
Yeah, I could. I mean, as long as, even just on the response, if it's saying, yeah, I mean, it does say other social media. When I was reading it, I was just saying other, so I guess I didn't pay attention to that part. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's sufficient. Maybe what we have is sufficient, but I do think that my gut tells me that you're gonna see the majority of people say, yeah, I want the news through some sort of social media, so.
I was under the impression that the township did have a Facebook page. Did it ever?
I think at one point there was. It's long been
Kind of defunct or inactive?
not active.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it the way it is, because I feel like it prompts them, if they don't like Facebook or don't use Facebook, it prompts them to put in the one they want. I'm also okay with just saying social media blank and letting them, if people feel that a reference to Facebook is too suggestive or too, pro-Facebook or whatever, or makes us seem like we're all, 60 like I am, then I would just do social media blank and let them fill in what they want.
And when you say direct mailing, could we be more specific, like maybe a monthly newsletter with key dates for the month and changes and budget and, how's your money getting spent, but mailed to all the addresses. But it'd take a commitment from the whole, you'd have your supervisor corner, whatever, but a one-pager type, something you can put on the refrigerator and, oh, there's a planning commission tonight, I'm gonna go to the planning commissions because it's important.
I think if we were going to do a newsletter, I suspect it would be twice a year, because I suspect what we do is do something that we can put in with the tax bills.
Just because mailing is expensive.
It is, yes, it is very expensive. So it would not be a monthly. If we were going to do something monthly, we'd probably work out something with the newspaper and just take out a page ad or something in the newspaper.
For
and put it
those who
there.
get
Yeah.
newspapers.
But an electronic newsletter would be, if you had an email list, I suppose, you could do it more frequently if it was an electronic newsletter as opposed to print.
But it is still a large commitment.
Oh, sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Having done newsletters,
Oh, yeah, right,
it's a monster commitment.
right. And again, I don't want to parse this too much, but because there is the direct email bulletins from the township, that's not necessarily saying newsletter. I don't know that it necessarily is intended to mean newsletter, but if somebody wanted to opt in on emails for important announcements or public hearings or that sort of thing, does that convey that in these choices here? You know what I mean?
Well, the first one is direct email bulletin, so they.
Right, that's what I mean. I didn't know what bulletins, if that was.
Yeah, that would be an opt-in
Okay.
process. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to parse a little bit here. On the first page on 5 and 6, you say on a scale of 1 to 5, but the scale you give is 5 to 1.
Well, I wrote it the other way and thought it looked weird.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts? If you think 5 to 1 works better, I'm completely happy to change it.
I would say reorganize your choices 1 to 5 then. I don't understand why you'd say a scale of 1 to 5, but then present the scale as 5 to 1. It seems like that's backwards.
Yeah, the only reason I did it that way, and I agree, it is odd, but generally, when you're looking at a scale, best is over here, worst is over here. That, at least in the ones I'm used to. And it may be different, maybe I'm odd, and I'm completely okay if you tell me I'm odd, it should go the other direction.
Because I think all the Likert scales I see are always 1 to 5 or 1 to 4 or whatever, and it's always left to right. And we read left to right, so it just feels like the numbers ought to be left to right. But I don't know, do other people, did anybody else notice that? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it makes a thoughtful return.
I didn't, but I agree with you.
You could almost just take it out and just start the sentence with 5 is the top and, 1 is the lowest, or something like that. How would you rate the overall? And then just leave it how you have it.
I'm completely okay to reverse it, especially for the reason that you mentioned. I appreciate your comment.
The other option, I suppose another option, if you prefer, would be, because they can still be numerically coded, I think, in the processing, would be excellent, very good, good, fair, poor.
It's interesting, because that's actually what it originally said on one of the two questions.
Yeah.
And we had a comment last time about that. I don't remember, I don't have that note in front of me, but there was a reason this was changed to the 1 to 5. The other benefit, I would tell you, that the other reason for the 1 to 5 is the end result of that will be a numerical value. 3.6 to 4.1, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
So it makes for a nice piece of data.
But couldn't that be still programmed in to be done behind the scenes because you have 5 choices?
You could, but it's one more step. Just like everything else, it takes time, especially for getting paper responses back. But even electronic, if we're getting electronic responses, it works better for them if we have a 1 to 5.
You just have it, like, it'd be a fill in the blank of 1 to 5, on a scale from 1 to 5, and then you just put the type in the number.
It could, and most of them have been check boxes, so that's why we just set it in the check boxes. I can change it to just be a line. That's fine.
Maybe if you're, which I'm assuming you're doing this anyway, but maybe if you're having that conversation with the consultant, you can talk to them about the best, in terms of layout and the best way to, I guess, display responses, and they can advise you as to their expertise, and you can use best judgment.
I have a question about question 2. I know we talked about that at the last meeting, and we were talking about these improvements and existing. We talked about technology as an option, and we talked about solar tables that would provide Wi-Fi and that type of thing. That was one of the discussions, and that's not here. And I guess my question to add on to that is, it seems as if by virtue of having these 7 options, that it's predetermined that these are the priorities. How are these developed? What informed that these should be, because I can come up with 7 different options, so I was just trying to understand what informed these 7 options, because it sounds like we know when we do in surveying other, please describe, that that's usually the least used of all of the choices, because people sometimes don't understand terminology, they check boxes, they don't write, especially if it's electronic. So I was just trying to understand that, because I don't know if any of these should be a priority unless there's something that helps to inform it.
Yeah. So first of all, the technology. I did make notes about the technology, and those are elements that it felt more like those should simply be noted in the plan as possibilities. They are. This was trying to hit at some pretty basic elements of whether or not we get tables with Wi-Fi. Actually, largely depends on whether our public services director can find a source that she's comfortable with can be maintained. And so I don't want to be asking about something
that I meant, that I feel, from a maintenance perspective, the maintenance folks may not want to even get near. So it's, you don't want to build expectations for something I can't provide. And these are all elements that we could do, that the maintenance folks could do if we needed to. That one, from a technology standpoint, we're not quite in that place to be yet with that. It's more of a piece of equipment rather than an overall improvement. Essentially, questions 12, 13, and 14 are all related in terms of the improvements. The original survey, some of these items were duplicated. And in fact, if you went through the original survey and went through this one, you'd find that we deleted some things. If it appeared in question, what is now question 12 or 13, it's not in 14 anymore, for example, which was the broadest list. But the intent is essentially to give sort of 3 bites of the apple. These 12 and 13 were items that have been recognized in various ways as being potentially important. Some of them right here, especially a couple of questions or checkboxes in 13. The first two, frankly, the covered pavilion and the light outdoor running walking track. But all the items in 12 or 13 have been identified somewhere along the way as this is something we'd really like to see happen, potentially. 14 is a question that came from a general survey, actually a couple different general surveys from other communities, so examples that we looked at. These are some of the various kind of broad possibilities, you might say. With I think the exception of the disc golf course, there's not been specific talk about it. Even the disc golf course was not just sort of, what about kind of a question I think that came up one time. So essentially, like I said, we're trying to get with 12 and 13, let's hear about the feelings about specific things that there's been interest in. With 14, are there other things that people might be interested in? That's sort of the format.
Let me go back to 13 for a second. I'm not sure that the staff doesn't want to, as a compelling reason to not do it. If it's public good, then, and it's a need, then if the resources are there, you do it. If not, there are a lot of people, staff that don't want to mow grass, doesn't mean we're not going to have playing fields.
I apologize if I misspoke. I didn't intend to say staff doesn't want to. What I'm saying is that that's an item that will take more research to look at. Is there an option that we, Union Township, can bring in that will function for us, that will be will have the durability, and we have the ability to maintain, that will do what we want it to do. So at this point, there's research that needs to be done before I think a survey question can be asked. And that's where we are for that particular item.
Well, and I gave some very specific examples during, this is the business that I'm in professionally, so I understand it, I spend a lot of time on these things. There are solutions that answer all of those questions. I gave an example of picnic tables that have, that's covered, that have solar panels that provide Wi-Fi and electric for, those things are already there. This isn't new technology, this is just, it would be new to our community, but it's not new in the industry. So those things are already there. I don't think if people don't know about it because they're not informed or experts, I'm expecting to ask for it. Because they're gonna say, well, whenever I go to a baseball field, I don't have Wi-Fi access because I don't think it's available. Well, I think it's our responsibility to tell them, yeah, it is available. Now, cost and all of those things, that's a whole nother discussion, but I think that's a question that can inform priority, because essentially that's what we're doing. With question 13, we're not probing what we should do, we're probing what the priorities are. That's what and that's why I was asking who determined that, and you gave some examples of how that was informed. So it wasn't informed through a previous survey, it was informed through what's happening in other communities and what can happen here. Well, technology can happen here, and it's already happening. That's what I'm saying. It's not even innovative anymore. It's starting to become commonplace, is what I'm getting at. So to leave something out, especially for young people that we're trying to bring into these spaces, that's essential to them. It's essential to grandma and grandpa who send photos of their grandkids playing sports, and they may not have some of the opportunities through their cellular plan to be able to do that. So Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi is starting to become very commonplace. That's what I was getting at with that. And I don't know how often, I can't recall how often this is done. So I know it's not done annually. So if that's the case, if this is done 5 years from now, then we're 5 more years behind the technology, unless somebody just boldly makes a decision that this is something that should be done. So I think it's important. You know, I was a part of the master planning that was done, Parks and Rec master planning when that was done. And we were talking about technology. We did that because these solutions didn't exist at the time, but they exist today.
Well, there's a couple of thoughts. First of all, I'm completely happy to add something to this list. This is not in any way sacrosanct, cast in stone. This is in pencil. We can change it, adjust it, whatever we'd like to do. My intent was with technology was to really focus on it as a project, put it in the plan as one of the recommended projects to actually add Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi at the parks. So this was not something to ask about, but rather actually something to go ahead and, I made the note, as I made notes with several items we've discussed, to say that really needs to be proposed in the plan. So we're not even asking the question, so saying the answer is yes, we'd like to propose it in the plan. And from there then, you know, you said the research would be done to figure out exactly how to do it, but that was really where we're going. One of the reasons why, from the perspective of Addie as a question, I think the answer to the question, should we have Wi-Fi in the parks, is going to be an overwhelming yes. And it was, so I can certainly ask the question. We had a question in the original survey that talked about park maintenance. And it was a question, frankly, designed to get, yes, we really find park maintenance to be important. That question is usually, and it had like 5 categories. This kind of maintenance, several different things, but it's all, do you think it's important to have park maintenance? And I think it's sort of one of those 1 to 5 scales, if I recall. I took it out because we just ran out of room when we added other things in. That maintenance question is usually in park surveys because the next thing after this park survey is going to be a request for a parks millage. In most communities, that would be the next thing. That's not our next thing. But in most communities, when they're doing a park survey, the next question that they're going to ask is, will you support a millage? And so the maintenance question is part of that, kind of helping people to see the value in that millage. It's somewhat the same thing here. If we put the question in there, it would be largely driving that yes answer that we really can almost have a consensus. That's what we're going to get. And so that's the only other reason I would leave it out. But I've already made the note to include it in the plan itself as part of the proposed activities.
Well, let me just add this as a perspective. This question is informing priorities. If I'm a trustee, which I'm not, trustee Barry is, and I'm sitting making decisions about priorities and resources, and I'm using an informed strategy to do that, I'm gonna look at the survey. Technology is not on the survey. Because apparently these things are important through a lens. Again, I still don't quite understand the lens because it's just been informed by, because these are very specific. It doesn't say build a pavilion. It says build a pavilion at McDonald Park. So, I mean, it's very, very specific. More importantly, if this is a question of not necessarily setting priorities, We're already on our way to building an aquatic facility, supported by the township. That question should even be there, if we're setting priorities, because that priority has already been supported through the formation of the Michigan Aquatic Authority, the Recreation Authority, that the township is investigating. So the township is, for those who don't know, is in partnership with the school district and Mount Pleasant School District and the city of Mount Pleasant. Those are the three entities that have equally invested at this point. There's no greater partner than the other, and I'm actually the township's representative to that authority. So that question probably shouldn't even be asked, because we've already asked it, we've studied it, I mean, we've done a feasibility study, we have an architect, we are on our way to design and so on and so forth. So again, just trying to inform decisions. I understand the intent of, yes, technology is important, but that's not documented anywhere. The public should be saying it's important. Now here, it doesn't set the priorities through a scale of 1 through, it just says which of the following. So I can check all of them. That means all of them are important to me. So I'm just trying, I see this as an opportunity because we're falling behind in that area, and I think it's very important, especially with the recreation patterns of young people today. And again, I say this as an expert, okay? Commissioner Squattrino is a chemist. I'm not. So I'm a recreation and sports professional. So this is what I do. So I know the trends. I know what's happening in communities and on university campuses, and I see an opportunity for our community to be able to say, to your point, I think you said it probably better than I could, I think it'd be #1 priority to many. But let the survey inform that, not our opinion as individuals in this kind of ad hoc fashion. Let's do that. And I guess I'm strongly committed to this because I think it's an amenity that's grossly been overlooked. And one today that is not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Would you prefer to have a separate question on this particular topic, or would you want it to be one of these choices under question 13? Because
it's not a question of putting these in priority order, I don't think it needs to be a question by itself. If it was about importance, I would say, yep, let's make it. Would you like technology in the parks?
Right.
Yes or no? But because this is not rank ordering anything, it's just letting people check which ones they see the value in. I think you can sit there and be compared then. Be compared because we know that there is going to be a quantitative value associated. X number of citizens said. So that, that's going to give us some qualitative, qualitative value. So just something there.
But, I'm sorry, Stan, are you looking at question 13 or 14?
I am. Question 13.
Question 13 on my copy says, please check 1. It's asking for your highest priority.
And as it's currently worded, it's
Right.
Please check 1. We don't have to have.
Right, well, I was going to suggest that, and I agree with him, that this is probably one of the key questions from the standpoint of planning, because you're trying to assess what, these are sort of more, like capital improvement types of things. And so, for the township to decide, well, which ones are we going to try to do, this is going to be an important question. I worry about limiting it to 1 because if you pick 1, you don't know what people's second choices are. And so I would be in favor of making sure that everything that's, out there that's a possibility is and relevant is on there, and maybe ask them to take their top 2 choices. Something like that. There's probably too few on there to have top 3 because that's already more than half of the.
Would it make sense? I completely understand what Commissioner Shingles is saying, because anytime you offer examples, you are essentially asking somebody to pick from the examples. And if you're asking somebody to pick from the examples without having any kind of awareness as to what gathered any kind of feedback from the residents already as to what projects they might be interested in. Anything that's excluded from the list is not even really mentioned. It's not a consideration, but, so it is a little bit leading in that way, but at the same time, I certainly understand why we would want to provide some examples so people have a sense of this is the types of things that we could do. So I'm wondering if the phrasing on this question, and I really have no problem with how many responses there are personally. I don't care if there's 20 responses, if it meant that you're getting valuable feedback from the residents. But maybe we're phrasing it as, you know, if we say adding a covered pavilion, you know, it's for instance, such as a pavilion next to at McDonald Park Playground. Maybe there's a technology question that says, you know, technology improvements such as Wi-Fi. I would think, for myself, I would think solar charging stations would be equally as important, because I have my own cellular service, but I'm gonna run out of a battery at some point on my phone, you know, somewhere. And so, you know, offering a kind of a such as, and maybe a few examples from kind of big buckets of ideas. That way you're stimulating some ideas from the respondent, but then giving them, like you do have, an other section that allows them to fill in something that might be overlooked, or maybe not, maybe it's a little bit more of a granular idea that they have that we're not listing, but at least we're maybe walking the line where we're offering some examples to stimulate the imagination, but also, you know, making sure that we give enough types of examples that people feel like they're at least able to respond in big bucket categories of things.
So we do have, question number 14 has the broad list, a lot of sort of wider variety of things. It's certainly not intended to be exhaustive either.
Yeah.
But it does cover a broader ground.
And but that question is getting at actual facilities. This question is improvements or amenities, which are different than expanded facilities. And there's probably a phrasing issue that we can look at there in terms of making it clear why we're asking two separate questions. But I do get the point that one is, a facility addition or expansion is very different than the inclusion of an amenity or the inclusion of an enhancement to an existing place. So I think both, it warrants two separate questions. But to your point, yeah, there are a lot of options to write in there, and there's no reason why we couldn't do that with number 13 as well.
Well, and obviously, one solution could be rephrasing to Commissioner Buckley's point of maybe rephrasing question 14 to say which of the following new recreation facilities or amenities or services, either one of those, because technology is a service, it's not an amenity, it's not a facility, because that's new. That doesn't exist, because this is talking about improvements in 13. So maybe that's where it can go, and those are in alpha order, so it's not in any way, it's all of them are in alpha order, but because there's so many of them, and if I remember correctly, that was a recommendation at our last meeting, was to put those in alpha order, so it did look like they were prioritized. So maybe adding technology, but, again, that's not a facility, so, we would have to then just state that it's recreation facilities, and we're already using the term amenities. Some people know what that means, some people don't. Service is because technology is a service, but it's also amenity. So maybe that satisfies it just to give it a place, and of course, that then helps to prioritize in that 1, 2, 3 versus 1. I get one choice of these 7 facilities. And sorry for my oversight, but the highest priority, I didn't see that. That's limited choices versus, we're asking for 3 here, but 1 here, and improvements. Should that be more than 1 to give some variety so people can say, these are my 3 things, and then obviously as we take the data and we aggregate it, then it's going to be, they're going to be numbers. They're clearly state what the priorities are.
So it sounds like what you're suggesting would be to to not make the change to 13, we'll delete it, like, so you're absolutely right, we don't need that there. So we would have then 6 choices in question 13, pick one or pick two of, I'm okay with picking 2. There's that value in giving the second choice, as you said, in 13. And then, what if we were to add, because right now in 14, they're all kind of very short statements. And I would be concerned about adding a long statement, kind of a such as type statement, because then it would stand out in the list. But what if we added 2 items here? One is solar charging stations, and the second one, public Wi-Fi, into this list, and just put them in alphabetical order.
I think those are good ideas.
You could even do a third that just simply says, other technological enhancements or something, so, but there is an other opportunity for them to fill in as well, but I mean, you know, we're not restricted to 2 types of technologies, but I guess maybe that's doubling up on them being able to fill in their own response as well. Yeah.
I would just think if we're gonna add a couple more to question 14, I would, instead of check up to 3, I would do check up to 5.
That's a good
Because,
point.
I mean, just because there's so many there, if technology was over on 13, I would say check up to 3 on that one. Just because the idea is to get the feedback, what's first, second, third,
Yeah.
or in this case, first and second, if we're only gonna do 2 on 13.
So perhaps 2 on 13, but you're suggesting 5 on 14?
I mean, just throwing it out there, I mean, I would do up to 5, I don't have to, but
Yeah.
just because there's so many options.
Okay.
Have we kind of covered, I have one other small question, I guess, or observation, but I didn't want to cut off the conversation if we haven't kind of covered that yet. Were we happy with that, where we are now?
I do have one question related to.
Oh, go ahead.
nutrition.
Yeah.
Our target audience for, say, McDonald's Park is families, young kids. It's not necessarily the young adult, the college students. And I was just wondering if Commissioner Shingles knows of any negative impacts of putting Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi in the parks. Are we gonna get an audience there camped out using the Wi-Fi, the free Wi-Fi, and that we don't necessarily want there? I'm just asking.
That's a great question, and then obviously every time we put things in public spaces, you know, you're gonna have attractive nuisance. I mean, that just shows up. And, you know, I mean, it just has to be managed. But you're absolutely right, especially as it relates to some of those challenging kinds of things that are part of, you know, technology. Because the average kid today has a cell phone that has, you know, that has cellular service to it that, you know, provides them access to internet and other things, but some don't because they can't afford it. And sometimes it's just a question of how much access do they have, is there limited plans, and, you know, those kinds of things. And obviously we did talk about the charging stations. I don't know if we need to get as specific as talking about solar charging stations, because that's like, sounds like we already made the decision that they have to be solar. They don't. They don't. They, you know, run power lines to them if that's what the solar is a sustainable product. It makes sense. It's the cost has come down tremendously on that stuff. And, you know, today you can take a bat to that stuff and can't destroy it. That's how it's been designed now over the years. And so, you know, I think if we're informative, let's keep the language simple as opposed to saying it has to be solar. No, let me just give an example. We have a complex at CNU, at softball and multi-purpose fields. We have a service building. The service building has 2 outlets in it. Those outlets are more popular than the games during tournaments, and because when people run out of that or they're looking for a source, they see a building and they go, and there's 2 outlets on each side of the building, and that's where they go plug their phones in. Well, you know, if that service is brought to, we're talking about that. You know, how do we bring that service to those, and those fields, for instance, are used by the public. That's part of, Pleasant Parks and Rec has their softball leagues there and that type of thing. And that's just how we do things today. You know, when we built that in 1998, we weren't talking about how many outlets do we have, because people need to plug their devices in. Well, we didn't have devices that we need to plug in, but today we do. So it has to be addressed, and it's not cheap to do it. You know, we're checking all kinds of options. Obviously, we have lights out there, and how do you feed off of those lights to create outlets? You know, we talked about that. So just giving, you know, some ideas. Again, it doesn't have to be solar, but it can be.
It's really maybe just an observation, but I'm wondering, because we do say in question 13, we mentioned the expanded network of paved pathways, but we do have in question, is it 11? Oh, no, I'm sorry, 10. If you answered yes to having a disability, we do say access improvements, but we don't draw a direct line to sidewalks or pathways within parks for the purpose of disabilities. Is that, and I'm only throwing it out there, is it necessary to kind of draw a line directly to that under a question about people with disabilities? You know, is access improvements sufficient? I don't know, maybe it is. I just figured I'd draw attention to it and see if anybody had an opinion.
Well, to your point, Commissioner Buckley, like where it says paved walking and biking paths, if you just change that to accessible, but not everybody knows what accessible.
Right.
I mean, that's the terminology that's used in, you know, ADA language, and but does that speak specifically to, you know, your question? I think it can for those who have disabilities and are looking for the word access, or accessible, I'm sorry, not access, but accessible.
I mean, we could certainly use the term barrier-free access improvements.
That might be, yeah, that might be.
Well, let me ask this. Does the ADA require that paved pathways be accessible?
Oh, if we're paving pathway, we need to design it, yes, per the
Okay.
Disabilities Act. That's built into the project.
Okay.
We can't create a pathway or sign.
Well, I'm not suggesting you should, or but I guess my point was that I think the fact that they would have to be, I guess to me anyway, would cover that. In other words, I think access improvements in 10 is sufficient perhaps?
Where I think there's a benefit in 10, first of all, having this item, and even be more specific about barrier-free access, is, I mean, for example, in Jameson Park, as part of the improvements that are going on right now, a sidewalk was constructed across the front. We have a sidewalk connector that goes into the park. But not everything has a paved pathway to it. You know, the playground,
That's what I'm thinking.
play equipment doesn't. I mean, there are certain elements that are barrier-free, but there are others that are not. So if we get that, that is a priority response, that will then move things along to make sure that gets incorporated into other projects. With Jameson Park, before I came on board, there was sort of this is what we're going to be doing. I was able to tweak a few things to get along these lines, but not able to rewrite the whole script. So I think there's value in certainly asking about barrier-free improvements as a separate item.
On item 13, where it says add lighted outdoor running, walking track, do you think we're giving maybe we could say the word path or hard surface path, not necessarily a track. Track sometimes lends you to believe an oval track, but I don't know. When I suggested it, I was thinking around the whole park, but.
Would you use the word course? I mean, we're already using pathway elsewhere.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, this, I think, was intended to be
Give you
self-contained.
self-contained, give you in McDonald's Park borders, but something big that you could walk around, you could utilize existing pathways, but it would be a way for people to get out and exercise or come to the park and exercise, so.
So that's up to you. So we use the word course, we can use pathway, track.
Well, is it envisioned as paved, or is it envisioned as that kind of high-tech, soft stuff that people actually run on, that like a track is made of?
I think that's, that, I don't know, actually. That's something we would be looking at when we're in the design phase of it. So right now, it's just the idea, is this something we want to put as a priority, to have this amenity at this particular park?
Yeah, yeah.
What looks like, you know, it could be crushed limestone, it could be asphalt, it could be, as you said, another material.
Yeah.
That's gets us into budget and design.
Yeah.
It might frankly be a combination of those. There are parts of McDonald Park that are
Well, and then
well
like-
drained, others are not. We may use different materials in different areas.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about that form of recreation, the running part especially, to know whether the word track would cause certain people to have certain ideas and other people to have different ideas.
You could call it a loop. I mean, that doesn't connotate traditional track, but it
Yeah.
doesn't connotate any kind of specific surface either.
A loop, I think, would be a good option.
Great idea.
Other comments or questions on the survey? So, are we thinking we want to see this again, or are we okay with him just proceeding based on the feedback given?
I think we probably need to confirm exactly where we are with 13 and 14, because I think we offered Robbie lots of options, but I don't think we really landed on specifically outside of eliminating the aquatic facility. I think all the rest of them were suggestions, and I feel like we landed it.
It does sound like there'd be value in having to take one more look at it.
Okay.
And that doesn't interfere with the timing too much?
No, we'll continue to work on the other elements of the survey, you know, and how we're going to generate it. So
Okay, okay.
it won't.
Well, hopefully March doesn't suddenly become such a jammed agenda that we can't really deal with it. But so the second part of this was the beginnings of the draft of the new document. The old document, by the way, is, including the index, is 67 pages. So you're not seeing a super large part of the what I assume will, maybe the older one won't be as long, but, and there's a lot of figures in it, maps and so on, but this is the early stages of it. But if you had a chance to read it, I'm sure Rodney would appreciate any comments. I noticed one typo. Under history, second paragraph, there's an extra of in there. Right after Union Township.
Under table 1, you have a category for age, sex, and health, but you've never used sex as one of the reports. So I would just remove it unless you're going to include
Thank
males
you.
and females as.
That, I think there was data, but the data was, it was part of the American Community Survey, the older data, and it was not really helpful. So I think I just didn't take that out of the title.
I had a question, but in the table, we have comparative data for 2010 to 2020. Is there comparative data for the other areas so that we can see changes that have occurred since, so for instance, if we're looking at housing and poverty, it's at 40, owner occupied housing unit, 40.7%. What was that in what was that in the previous census year?
Yeah.
That date even there?
The challenge you have, in some cases, they ask the question differently. In some cases, they recorded the answers differently. So some of these may be even comparable between the two. The element in terms of this plan is really intended to provide a snapshot of time. It's not intended to be like a master plan where we would be looking at what are the trends. This is, for Parks and Rec, we're really looking at what's going on right now. We have the 2010 census number actually largely because the 2020 number is so controversial. The 2020 number is certainly, it's down, it's a pretty big drop, and it's largely, at least some people think it's largely related to challenges with the count being in the midst of COVID. In particular here, the count took place after the students all left town, with the CMU shutting down live classes, in-person classes. So the 2020 number, while it's there, and it is an official number, is certainly not looked at as being the most accurate number. And so that's why I tucked in the 2010 number, just so at least there's a reference point to kind of see where that is. These are the numbers we have to work with. You know, they are what they are. And so, but it was intended essentially to be a snapshot other than that little piece.
So, am I reading this correctly in saying that of 11,699 people in our area, 43% of those people are living in poverty?
That's what the census says, yes.
It's typically related to student population.
You didn't have student population.
We had some.
We have several populations that fit within that, but Isabella County is the county in the state of Michigan that is recognized by the federal government as a place of persistent poverty. I think we're the only county in the state that actually has that designation, where we qualify for certain federal programs. We call it ups our, if we're going after certain grants, it puts us at the top, you know, that kind of thing. But it is because of populations, a number of populations in the community that create that circumstance. It's one of those things where it needs to drive our decision making. It's a number that is shocking, but it's also one that we need to recognize and make part of our decisions we make. I've been, as part of the Chamber of Commerce, their Leadership Institute program, I had the opportunity this year to be a part of that. And one of our tours was of the Strickler Center. And it's a remarkable resource in this community with multiple nonprofits working together to provide resources. And just hearing some stories and hearing the level of service. I mean, during the COVID shutdown, cars lined up down the road. I remember seeing them.
Still are.
Still are, yes, because they're still doing that service for the same reason, because of the pandemic. We have a very significant need here, but we also have organizations that step up and fill it. We, as part of our efforts, this number informs our efforts, what we do with Parks and Rec, again, to help provide services to that population.
And just to touch on that, maybe you guys would know, and I just heard this week, I haven't had a chance to verify it, that in some of these poverty numbers, that to make Isabella County one of the poorest, doesn't factor in CMU and doesn't factor in tribal, is what I was told. I don't know if you can verify that. Not the census itself, but when they do the poverty. So people look at median household income or some of these, like a Dollar General, for example. They look at, okay, well, there's their parameters, we're going there because these numbers are really low. So again, that's what somebody just told me this week, because this conversation just came up about Isabella County being one of the poorest counties in the state, if not the poorest. So, but somebody did tell me that doesn't factor in those two CMU faculty and staff, as well as anybody at the tribe. So again, I hadn't verified that, would you?
I know I can't answer that right offhand, so.
I would think it would have CMU faculty and staff if they lived in Isabella.
Again, I haven't had a chance to verify that, but there was some uncertainty there of why that number was so low. And
When you
that
say,
was,
when you say the number was low, you're talking about the median income?
yeah, whatever they deem poverty level on, whether it's median household income or I don't know what they use. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to gather enough information. I know that question has been posed to Jim McBride at MMDC. Again, and I don't know what that answer was. Those discussions were just literally this week. So,
I mean-
it's only Tuesday.
I wrote grants for years and years, and my understanding is all that data is derived from census. So unless somebody is being excluded from census, then there's not a separate set of data that would exclude a set of the working population or a set of specific.
Well, it's not census related. I'm not talking about this poverty number. I'm talking about a different number.
The census does capture median incomes and whatnot too, right?
Yeah, if that's what it is, like I said, I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
maybe what I should do is gather the data from the person that told me this.
Census typically gathers, I mean, this is not exclusive. The census gathers a lot more information than this.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and so anytime I've ever had to pull information about incomes, those sorts of things, it's all driven from the census. And from a granting organization, that's the only thing that they would accept. They're not going to accept something that is like they're going to accept census data. They're not going to accept privately generated data.
Yeah, I don't believe that's what it was.
Yeah.
But I'll certainly, try to get some more information, because if that's the case, that would certainly explain why our numbers are so low.
It's also quickly just an observation in the table. It looks like the largest demographic, which is 18 to 64, is missing. Under 18 is down, 25 under 18, over 65. So 18 to 65 is missing. I don't know if that's broken down more, if that's the range, I'm not sure, but it's missing.
I'll take a look at that, I think that this was, I recall, it may have been done simply to kind of focus on certain populations. This, I did that, and I just can't recall why I took it out. So I'll go back and look at it, because I certainly.
Not to sound, here, I'm 60 years old, I've lived here forever, I've never had anybody from census pull any information from
Never filled out the form?
me. Never,
You ever got the form?
never.
What?
You're uncounted?
Are you sure you're alive?
Since 1990, I've lived
So you're part of this,
Union Township.
you're part of the reason why we're short.
Well, I'm just saying, maybe the system's broke.
I'm fascinated that we couldn't find you. Boy, they really work hard to find, even in COVID, they worked really hard to find people. I remember in 1990, I didn't fill out the form. No, we got the long form that year. They had two different forms, but I think we got the long form. I apologize, not 1990, 2000. And I just didn't want to do it, had other things to do. And they started pestering. And just made a nuisance of themselves until finally, it's fine, fill out the form.
I have talked to census people on my security cameras because they're knocking on your door persistently, and you're like, all right, I'm not there, but call me, give them a phone number, so, yeah.
That's fascinating that you're good.
So the
Sorry.
important question though is, do you get the phone calls telling you that your auto warranty has expired? And this is your last opportunity to renew it. Because if you don't, then it's probably worth being an anonymous person. But if you're still getting those, you might as well fill out the census. Any other comments on this? I think it's off to a good start. I'm assuming we'll see the other chapters as they roll off the presses.
Yeah, it says action, do you need action on that? Or-
Actually, the only action was really related to the survey, and I think we've got that. We don't need any formal consensus.
Any other comments on the documents? Okay. So then, let's see, where are we? We are at extended public comment. So anyone who wants to address the planning commission on any item, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not, may do so at this time. Just give us your name and address for the minutes and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Extended public comments open at 8. Call it 8:30. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that back up for another month. And final board comment, any comments from board members?
Well, if this is truly my last meeting, it's been great working with all of you. And look forward to great things.
So, Mike, you have one more meeting. Next Tuesday is the sidewalk committee. You are still planning commission representative next week.
I'll be there.
And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the planning act says that you continue to serve until your successor is.
I know.
named. So,
Just to let you know, next week's gonna be the last week you're gonna be able to get me for a while.
yeah,
Well, there's plenty of applicants, so it shouldn't be hard to fill 4 spots.
right.
And when did you think you guys were meeting again?
It should be our next meeting
And
for the
that's-
planning commission?
Yeah, no, for board,
I'm
because
sorry.
they'll name a successor for
Yeah, the next trustee meeting.
Trustee meeting.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the next 2.
I would like to say it would be the next meeting.
Yeah. Well, either way, I
me.
mean,
Every 2 weeks. right?
There are 2 more meetings between now and the next planning commission meeting, so, yeah, I'm sure.
Well, I'm thinking sidewalks, pathways, but I'll be there.
You're gonna have us you gotta come in for Tuesday.
Well, then, if this is in fact your last planning commission meeting, let me officially thank you for, actually, I don't know how many years of service, but a significant period in this recent period, and then a lot of service earlier.
Yeah.
I think you were coming off just as I was coming on, so probably more than 10 years ago. So we've appreciated having you, and it's been fun. It's been a lot of tough issues and other things that we've dealt with, and you've always made good comments and brought a perspective that's been valuable, I think. And so again, thank you.
and my term is up as well as Commissioner Buckley. We officially have not been nominated yet, but our applications are in. Don't know what we'll find out here over the next month. So if this is my last meeting, thank you all. I don't really know.
If it's my last meeting, my wife will sigh a sigh of relief. So,
Yeah.
I hope to see you guys again, but if not, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, I thank you both as well, and I don't know what to say. I don't know how many applications there are. I don't know what's going through the supervisor's mind, so, but, yeah, no, I think, comments in the air. Otherwise, I think we have a good board, and I think we've had a good, or commission, I think we've had a good commission for a while. I think all of you have brought something of importance to it, and that I continue to get to work with all of you for a good long while. Except for Mike, he's
Feel the same way. Thank you.
Any other board comments?
I believe
If not-
there's 7 applicants. I believe if I've counted correctly, there's 7 applicants.
Oh, wow. Including these two?
Including these 2.
Okay. For a total of, three.
I believe there's 4 positions, and we have 7 applicants for 4 positions.
Oh, that's right, yes, 1, 2, 3, and then Alex is, okay. Wow, okay.
So in the spirit of Chicago politics, as a Chicagoan, please tell the trustees, vote early, vote often.
Right? Yes.
Well, then we've completed our agenda, so we'll stand in adjournment until March, I guess it's gonna be March 15th. So that's gonna be-
No wonder, when we were going there for a while. I was like, there's no way.